Welcome, everyone. And if this is your first time, then welcome. If you were here last Thursday, then welcome back. And I'm sure you will know that this is now part two of part four webinar series. And tonight we're going to stay inside the same framework that I introduced last week, but we're going to be turning the lens around on ourselves. So last week, we looked at the horse as a system, and tonight we're going to look at the other half of the system, which is no surprise, it is you. So I'm just going to go a little bit of an overview for those who maybe didn't join last week. If you haven't already, check your emails. You would have received last week. If not, just send me an email and we will forward that on. So the horse as a system, not just this isolation of a issue, isolation of a treatment. And this week we're going to be turning this lens around. So the core insight from session one was that this horse is a structure, okay? It is a roadmap. Have a look at the image here and look at how it's so interconnected. And when we stop looking at treatment in isolation, for example, kissing spine, for example, hock, stifle, fetlock treatment, pain has to be removed, but we stop looking at just that one issue in isolation, and we start to see that the body, the horse's body, is this innately intelligent system that it is actually responding to the external environment the whole time. And when we stop putting what I almost call plasters on individual joints, and yes, I would be lying if I said it wasn't a relief, when you find out you have that diagnosis, it's like we have an answer, but we have an answer for one symptom. What effect has that symptom had on the rest of the body? So, in one sentence summary from session one of the horse is the horse is not a problem to be fixed. It is simply a system to be understood. So, here's a question for you. Why is it that one day the ride with you and your horse or the groundwork just feels effortless, and the next day on the same horse, the same you in the arena, everything just falls apart? Why does this happen? Have a little think about this, maybe write some notes. So nothing has changed, okay? You haven't got a new trainer, you haven't changed the saddle, maybe even the environment in terms of your riding at home. Everything is the same. Tonight, this is the answer. This is the question we are going to be answering. Not in vague, not in this general sense, but I'm actually going to give you a practical framework, which is what I've applied for years and years of over 30 years working in this industry. I've refined and refined and refined so that I can help more horses thrive and more horse and riders thrive together. So we use this word connection constantly in riding, but we rarely actually ask what it means. Okay, what we really ask ourselves is, what does this mean on a physical level? Is it some magical connection that most of us can't see, we feel? And then how do we turn that into a system that we can replicate and that we can actually have more of with our horses? And understanding it in this way changes how we diagnose what is going wrong and how we can design what should go right. Because it is not just some made up thing, right? Most of us know this connection. Most of us have experienced maybe a glimpse of it, or we have it on a regular basis, or it happens to us once a month with our horse. It is a continuous biomechanical exchange between two bodies in motion. Horse, human, in motion. That's the connection bit, where every input from one system produces a response to another. And we're going to deep dive together in this. So we have been trained to look at this single isolation solution. We spoke about it last week with the arthritic hock. We spoke about it when we changed the saddles, and some of us have been through about, I know a few of you actually emailed me in and said, I've tried 10 different saddles cost thousands of pounds and I'm still nowhere better. Or it's the rider. I've started take going to the gym because I'm getting fitter or need to be more balanced and my leg needs to be straighter in the saddle. Sometimes those things are true, but they are almost never the whole picture, and they are almost never on their own will change the entire result. The question tonight is not which is it, it is how these two systems can interact and where in that interaction the breakdown actually happens. So, this is not a criticism of any individual professional. Everyone involved is doing their job well within the limits of their scope. The problem is the structure. The problem is the system. The industry is built around separation. The rider, the horse goes to one set of experts, the rider goes to a different set of experts, and the two conversations almost never happen in the same room and on the same day with the same system running underneath them. And that is the gap what tonight is addressing. So, you know this pattern because you've lived it from the horse side, right? You've tried numerous, maybe different vets, numerous chiropractors, different saddle fitters. You've changed the shoeing, you've had the teeth checked. Each finding something legitimate. So every professional that you're bringing in is saying something value insightful. Each prescribing something to fix that buys maybe a few weeks, some of us a few months of relief. And then the same problem returns, and unfortunately, this pattern recognized where it can actually escalate in a slightly different shape, but you may read it as, bad luck or the horse's age, rather than as the same system conversation that you have been having without actually realizing it. And this is the isolation trap, and it applies just as directly to the rider. So the same exact pattern plays out on the rider side. Okay, you have probably had some of this version or maybe all of these, and each practitioner is very good at what they do. They each help, within their margins, but because of none of them actually assessing horse structure, human structure, how those systems interconnect with one another, we are getting a lot of owners that I'm sure maybe you're sat here listening to this today going, this is me. Like I'm left almost like Chinese whispers, piggy in the middle, trying to make sense of what one person has said, which is valid and legit, versus what another person said. And then you're in the middle you're trying to be the bringer together and make this seem effortless despite your crazy busy lifestyle. So, what can happen is that they are all in their own way treating the fires. Remember last week we spoke about the fire. We spoke about how it's constantly like we are fire brigade putting out little fires everywhere on our horse's body, but we're not actually understanding why these little fires keep happening, why these symptoms keep coming back or keep reoccurring in a different area of the body because we don't understand our horse's structure. So this is the same with the rider. The result is a slow progress, worsening recurring issues, more emotional investment from you, time, and is it just that it's my horse and he's always going to be this way, or is it just that I'm built this way and I'm always going to have these problems? The answer to that question is no. But the solution to those questions is a system, not another appointment. Okay. So the word I come back to is tailored, not generic, not based on the average person, body, textbook rider, but actually built around you, your structure, your injury, your history, your hormonal age, phase, your discipline specific demands, and of your horse. So when we do this kind of isolating approach, it gets very expensive. It costs a lot of time, money, and personally, I've been through this and worked with clients where it's knocks your confidence, it knocks your actual self-belief because you feel like you're managing different expert opinions, but you still have no one consolidating this all for you and actually helping you in a practical way that you can make and feel progress very smoothly and quickly. So everything in tonight's session is built around this. Just want to make sure that I am on the right one, two, three. Sorry. Just making sure that I'm on the right track here and letting people all in. Okay, so I looked at this from a rider's perspective. So in terms of what riders are going through, which is, lessons, they do help. If you're someone as a rider who takes responsibility for themselves, it's going to be that, maybe you've done Pilates, maybe you've done going to the gym, you are trying. Most not even riders, but most equestrians working in this industry are wanting to be better. And again, you have yourself looked at from a physiotherapy perspective. I know some riders that have even worked with personal trainers, but none of these professionals, which is the conversation we keep having, are talking to one another and are helping you as the person in the middle paying for all of this to understand it and to have a better practical perspective to go forward. So, okay, really honing in on this because I really want us to step away from almost imagine we're taking off the blinkers. Okay, almost imagine we're taking away this one size gym approach, one size Pilates approach, one size eating. You get the point, right? One size training approach. We're going to start understanding our bodies with a bit of curiosity into how we are put together, our structure. And then start to understand how that relates to our horses so that we can feel progress, right? So let's move on to this section 3. Okay, so everything we've applied to the horse last week, the roadmap, the load map, the questioning what we mean by compensation patterns applies equally to the rider, to you, the equestrian here today. We are not looking for perfect symmetry. We are not comparing you to a textbook image, to a correct seat that does not exist. We are asking, how is this specific, your body, my body, built? Very simple question. How does it move? How does the movement then transfer into the horse underneath me? Start to imagine this. If you and I rode your horse at separate times, but in a same session, we would both have a very different experience. And most importantly, the horse would have a different experience because my structure, the way I'm put together, is very different to your structure. And when we understand that it's a very logical framework, right? You're probably nodding, going, well, of course, that makes sense. But are we applying the same systems thinking to our everyday? So the reframe is that both rider and horse we know are completely different, but we need to stop using the words like correct seat, stop using descriptive words, but actually start to use structure, start to use words where we can have 5 people or 10 people sat in front of us today that understand the structure of the human body and go, yes, well, that makes sense why that rider is feeling this certain way, why she's having these certain issues, perceived issues on the horse, and why that person doesn't. It then becomes this reframe of descriptive, ego-based backing yourself to a very logical and collaboration conversation. And that's what we want, right? Because we're all in this for the horse. We're all in this to be better equestrians, whether you're a rider, whether you're a therapist, whether you're a trainer, saddle fitter, whoever, you have your why for why you're in this industry. And the way we can all come together and stop feeling so isolated and stop feeling like We are trying to protect ourselves. We all have ego. But the question is sometimes, do we let that ego take over when we are using um, a model that is based on experience, which is still not a bad thing, but can that experience be put into a structure frame that anyone can use and again find to question, but that takes away a lot of the emotion side as well. And this to me is really, really important. So have a little look at these two systems that move my face here that are constantly kind of in a conversation together, right? So we have, the external world, the environment influencing both the horse and the rider at the same time, but different sensations going on through the body. We have the human rider, which depending on your experience, your age, your relationship with the horse is going to respond very differently. If your horse suddenly goes into like a highly aroused state, some riders find that exciting and actually relax into it. Some riders might grip and be tighter and stop breathing as calmly. And then you have that relationship with how the horse then responds to those two kinds of riders. You see this all the time. Like, I'm sure you're sat there going, yeah, this is making sense. So I just think sometimes we are focused very much on a horse, whereas if we start understanding the our side of the structure, the human side is how am I feeling and reacting to this noise? How am I reacting to my horse today? How am I reacting to myself? Sometimes I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm in kind of conversation and I'm having a bit of I call it like a mare with myself today. And that's going to be directly impacting how I show up with the horses. Again, we're not going for perfection here. We're just simply going for understanding. Okay. So the internal then becomes this external immediately. And this is the amazing, but also very um, honest thing about horses is that they're going to directly mirror what you're saying without saying it. And, the rider's internal state does not stay internal. Okay. Like a common one that we're talking about here today is it is this biomechanical expression within seconds. Okay. It's not a description, it's not a woo-woo magic. It is a biomechanical expression. And that expression really transmits directly through the saddle into the horse's movement system. And it's not a metaphor, but this is physics. A rider with a tighter shoulder changes the angle of their arm. Yeah, if you have tension in your right shoulder, just clamp your right shoulder towards your ear for me at the moment. Feel what that does to your elbow, what that does to your hand positioning. That has a direct effect then on your contact in your reins. What's that going to have on the horse? This changes the pressure, okay? Now, this is for us that might feel we already know we have a tight shoulder. But as most of us do, we're kind of consciously aware that might have a little bit of pain in the morning, but we get on with it. We're like, oh, I've warmed up. But have we warmed up? Or have we just told ourselves that we're okay? And then we get on our horse and we wonder why the transitions are not as smooth as they were yesterday. A compressed hip can change the weight distribution in the saddle. We know that. We've got studies to show that now. Every psychological state has a physical signature. So whether you're someone who gets really excited about riding, you're going to ride very differently to your horse that day. If you're, had some sad news and you're feeling a bit down, you're going to ride very differently. And that's what I mean by that psychological state that we're in is going to have a direct physical imprint on your horse. Okay, so let's give you some, real examples. I'm going to walk you through specific examples and frameworks that become real. Um, okay, I'm sure you've all been in this situation, but for example, we've got, show competition. We've got like a show jumping event here. You're in the warm up, or let's just say we're at the national dressage, and the horse has been brilliant in the warm up. Okay, responsive, forward going, very confident. And the minute the rider walks into the arena, then the partnership starts to unravel. Head and neck all over the place. Suddenly, you've gone from this uh, what feels very effortless contact, which your horse feels like the energy from behind is coming through. They feel very consistent. You feel quite relaxed. To suddenly in the arena, in a split second, your horse's head is in the air like a giraffe. The tension through the rein is solid, or it's not there. You feel so disconnected from your horse. Okay. Why does this happen? So we need to think of this as two athletes working as one. Um, by the time the bell has rang, whether you're starting your show jumping round or that bell for you to start your dressage test up the center line, you see this as well. Any of you know Tristan Tucker? He does a brilliant sketch of this, which related so well. Whereas you're going around the outside of the warm-up arena in the dressage test, and you're riding really well, like you're very confident, your inner monologue is great. The minute the bell goes and you're like, right, we've got this, something at the center line, your horse spooks, and you're like, what's going on, right? And this has all happened to all of us. So this is not to do with the horse. This is to do with our change of state. And sometimes you can say, well, you were relaxed and the horse, did this. But when we start understanding these are two athletes that are trying to work in one sequence, then we'll understand that, okay, what is the sequence of events that I need to understand that I can help my horse? And that's what we're going to go in today. So this is the 5-step sequence. This was actually explained on something different, but by another good friend of mine, practitioner. And he so good at systemizing and so good at translating what we all feel every day into very easy to understand framework. So we're going to start with a trigger. We're then going to start with how that trigger then spreads and then it transmits. It can then manifest and then obviously have the result. So it's just going to be more of a logical framework instead of us having these experiences that I hear all the time from riders, including myself, where you're like, what happened? It was a split second. 1 minute I was in the arena, the next minute I was on the floor. Like it was so random, so sporadic. I don't know what happened. It's never random, it's never sporadic. There is always a sequence of events. So let's start with the trigger. In this case, the trigger was the shift from the warm-up arena to the main environment in the competition. The crowd, the atmosphere, the spooky plants, the banners, you know, all these different kind of external things. And the awareness of being watched and scored is also very true, which not many of us speak about. For the rider, this shift produces this really specific response, going from in the warm-up, you're in your own mind, obviously watching other people you don't ride into them, but you're pretty much like, no one's really watching me, compared to in the arena where you're the main event. There's no one else in there but you. All eyes are on you, okay? And for this rider, this shift has produced a shift in your internal response. So maybe it's not panic, maybe you're not nervous rider, something more subtle, like you just go, okay, I'm going in, it's on me. Even if you've got your game face on, you still change that internal state of I'm on there. It's my time now. It's game time. And it's that subtle shift, a tightening, maybe a little bit of brace, maybe just forget to breathe a little bit. And maybe you withdraw some bit of energy, you tighten your inner thighs. That triggers, doesn't have to be dramatic. They are very small. And this is where the sequence starts. We then have the spread. So once the trigger fires, it does not stay localized. It spreads through the rider's body along the same pathways we talked about in the horse last week. So in this case, it might be a tightening of the jaw, which leads to a bracing of your neck, which compresses in the shoulder, which changes your arm positioning, which changes your hand positioning, which has changed the contact. And then you go down that center line, you turn right, and you're like, my horse won't turn right. Why is he not turning right? Oh my God, he's blocked. And you can see how this quickly spreads. This simultaneously compresses, travels down our thorax, travels down into our hips. This can alter then how we're sat. Maybe we then start to go from he's not turning right to shifting weight down to my left hip because I'm trying to put more pressure on my right hand, which affects how our seat is in the saddle. All of this, by the way, has happened in seconds. Some of us are not even aware because it's happened that quick. And by the time we've realized it's spread, we have to do the next movement. Okay. We're just slowing this down so that we can understand it's never a freak thing, it's always a sequence. We then go to step three, which is the transmit. Now, this is the crossing point. So, what happened inside the rider system is now entering our horse's system through the saddle and the contact, the leg, the shift in the weight distribution. The horse does not know why the rider has changed. He only knows that she has. And the job as a prey animal, this is what we need to remember, they are prey animals, we are the predators, is to respond, is to move away, is they have such a refined nervous system that they need to, for survival, respond quickly. He does not have an option to wait and see because in the wild, that would mean I'm getting eaten. Now we're being dramatic here because we're only moving down the center line, but the horse still has that built internal nervous system response. Very important to remember. I often forget it as well. This turns into number four, a manifest. This is me on a young horse. Um, we used to do workshops many, many years ago where I was the rider to horses that never had anything saddled on them to being saddled and obviously had to have an audience. The horse is always honest. The manifest is we cannot interpret intention. This is the horse. He cannot respond to what actually arrives in his body through the contact. So in this case, the inconsistency in your contact, in our weight as we're going down that center line, has changed the saddle pressure, compressed the seat maybe on one side, and all of this has produced this inconsistency in what the judge is seeing and what you're feeling. They're not misbehaving, they're simply responding to the trigger. When we start looking at behaviors like this, your answers are very, very clear. Most of us are just very focused on the output of, sorry, what's happened at the end result, as opposed to slowing things down and going, ah, that's why he did it. The horse in the main arena was not the different horse. He was the same horse, but reading and responding, key point, to a different rider. So, step five of the five sequence is the result. So, and this is where almost all of the analysis happens is in the results, the debrief after the class, the conversation with the judge, the trainer, the conversation with your internal, with yourself. I don't know about you, but competing for me, I was my own worst critic. I was very hard on myself, and it was more about me feeling guilty and me letting myself down, letting my horse down. That's what really mattered more to me. But the result, as we know now, sat here today, we're not on our horses, is not the be all and end all. The result is just the last step in this sequence. The leverage is not there. It is the steps one and two before the transmission has happened. So this is what changes when you have a framework. You stop analyzing the end result, the judge, the guilt, and start looking at where in that sequence with my horse, where in that sequence can I go from blame to diagnose? And this is the shift really want you to focus on and think differently today. By the way, I've had a lot of good feedback from the first webinar. So if you really enjoyed and you find these perspectives interesting and want to know more, reply to the email that you're going to get with the recording, click on the link for completing the questionnaire and let me know what you'd like to know more of, because I'm on a mission to help more riders and horses, and we have all the access online now. So, okay. So the question then goes from, oh my God, was it me? Was it my horse? This isn't useful. It leads to more of this self-blame, self-sabotage. Neither of these produces a plan. And you and I, equestrians, we're practical people. Where The question is, where in the five-step sequence did the trigger start? It becomes more diagnostic, specific, it has an answer, and that leads directly to the plan. We all like a plan. We move from frustration to functional plan. I know what to do going forward. Okay, so I want to say something directly, and this is like a bit of a thought. I'm quite a reflective person. Is should I be doing better than this? And I don't know what I'm doing. This is something that I used to even question as uh, being a therapist, being working with different horses all around the world and people wanting results, and also as a rider. It is what happens when you're working hard inside a system that is not giving you the complete picture. So when you have the complete picture and you have that five-step sequence, the frustration has somewhere to go. And it becomes a diagnosis instead of a question with numerous variables and answers, which leaves me and many clients I've worked with in a headspace of more confusion. And I want you to carry that shift going forward tonight. Okay, we're going to be looking at going from frustration to compassion. So I should be doing better than this. Here is exactly where it is broken, and here's what I can do about it. And this, I've used the sequence pattern myself. Okay, this didn't go well today with the treatment, for example. Where in the trigger did it start? Where in the sequence did it start? Was it the trigger? Where in the trigger sequence? This in my brain and with clients I've worked with provides us with a much better systematic approach. The goal is never perfection, right? I never want you to think of, God, we've got to be perfect the whole time. The fact that us humans are so imperfect and we fail and we mess up and we're asymmetric makes it fun. And where down our human brains have we been attached to the perfect rider, the perfect seat, the correct seat? It requires everything to go right every single time. We're working with, remember the two systems coming together. It is extremely fragile when we start thinking about perfect and correct, because the moment anything changes, it feels like it's collapsed. So remember, us as equestrians, as riders, we are elastic, dynamic, adaptable. That's the mission, to create more equestrians that are so accepting, understanding of the wonderful bodies that we have in the different shapes and sizes and levers and functions, and start to look at them as how can we just be better, elastic, adaptable riders so that we can be better for ourselves and our horses. See the shift in perspective? It's the same with what I said to you, guys, last week. And this is what we're building tonight. Not a perfect rider, but an elastic, dynamic rider, right? An elastic, adaptable rider. That is the goal. That's what gives me and a lot of the clients I work with around the world so much more joy, is that shift in adaptable, elastic, and not being focused on perfection. So what do we mean by elastic, right? Again, it looks different in each context, but if the goal is elastic, adaptable, resilient riders, that is the common theme and framework that we can all work into despite our age, despite our structure, despite how we're put together. So in training, the ability to absorb a bad session, okay, understand what happened, come back with a clearer question in the next day. In a competition perspective, this looks like the ability to feel the trigger, contain the spread, and stay present enough to influence the transmission between before the horse has already manifested it. And in an injury, because oh my God, when injuries happen in horses, it's like the world's come to an end and we all start self-sabotaging and hating rehab. But okay, what about an injury as the ability to adapt the system intelligently rather than pushing through or stopping entirely? Just sit, with all of that for a moment and just sit with what I'm saying. read what I'm saying on the screen. We're being elastic, adaptable. We're being from rigid to adaptable, from correct to elastic. So this is the resilience bounce back, okay? And I want to reframe what resilience actually means in this context. So it is not about the absence of breakdown. Every partnership has a breakdown. It's the hero story, what makes us say, oh, I had a horse like that. I can help you there. Or every rider has rounds, like the one that an example I've given with the dressage. The question is not whether it happens, it's just how long you stay in it. Okay, just that simple reframe. With the framework, the breakdown becomes data, and data we can act and work on. So we're going to be looking at part of analyzing us as riders is looking at fatigue, okay? The elephant in the room that most of us are overlooking in performance variable in equestrian sports. So I want to name something that the equestrian world has been consistently failing to address and admit because let's face it, as riders, we have so much going on and we're like, I don't want another thing to think about. But we talk endlessly about horses being tired. Is it too much? Did I push them too much? We monitor workload, hopefully, recovery, competition schedules. We build into that horse's program. What about the riders? What about you and I sat across from each other today? The rider's fatigue is almost never spoken about in this conversation, and it must be. Because if we go back to that sequence that I mentioned earlier, and as the rider, if you're tiring, just getting tired during your session and thinking that's not going to be affecting your horse, we then need to drastically realize how much impact we're having. Okay. When the rider is fatigued, the first thing that deteriorates is the precision of your biomechanical output, keeping it to a not descriptive but very specific understanding. The timings changes. So say, for example, you start getting tired, that weakness in your right hip, okay? It starts small, but it builds and builds up, and the horse feels it because the horse is receiving the transmission that you're giving through the seat, the transmission that you're giving the horse with every single stride they feel. So, fatigue is not about willpower. It's not like I need to keep going, I will prove this wrong. It is a system problem. And like every single system we've spoken about with the horse with you today, the solution is what I like to and what I've created is a three-pillar approach. So let's look at the female rider as a um, pillar, as these three pillars, which I'm going to go into more detail. Okay, three pillars to build this elasticity in yourself as a rider, but also to address the fatigue that is silently costing you your partnership. I'm going to be working through this system today. They are not separate appointments. We're not looking at things in isolation anymore. We're going to be looking at things as frameworks so that we can have a more structured communication and structured approach to working with ourselves and our horses. So, fuel, okay? Nutrition is the context of the female equestrian athlete. It is not about your weight. It is not about dieting, new supplements, new whatever. It is about how your energy state determines what you can produce in the saddle, how quickly you recover from riding, and what that costs you. How your hormonal regulation affects your nervous system, which the horse directly responds to, as we've learned. The female rider has very specific hormonal and metabolic variables that can affect our biomechanical output, depending on your age, depending on your structure, experience. This is not personal. This is not even that um, it's a magic cure. It's an understanding that when we understand how we are fueling ourselves, what we're eating, what our body responds to certain foods, how our hormones are. Are we maybe in the menstrual phase of our life, or are we in the perimenopausal, postmenopausal years? That is still going to be affecting how we show up from a fuel perspective. The second pillar is what I call structure. So this is to do with movement pillar. Now, this is not generic. You know, when people say, oh, movement, you mean go to the gym, start Pilates, start yoga, start something. You just do something for your body with movement. But actually, when we go back to understanding the structure, and this will make a lot of sense in the next webinar when I'll be talking to you about the discipline demand specific, which is the next part of this series. We need to be looking at, based on how we are put together, based on what the discipline is required, and based on our horse, what are the best movements we should be doing? Because as someone who has not only worked with many women around the world who want to be stronger and fitter in the saddle, there's there's some of us that can go to the gym and it will improve our riding to what we need to be. It might make us um, have more stable leg positioning, but for other riders, it might make us stiffen up in the hips so much that we start to brace with every single stride. Same idea to go and do movement, different effects and different effects on your horse. This is the thinking that I really want us to start to shift to. The third thing is signal. So how you're showing up in that internal state. A lot of this is going around nowadays with things like nervous system regulation. This for me is a fundamental pillar because of the states that can affect us with horses. So warm-up arena versus competition arena. Riding at home, riding in front of a trainer. Does that affect our nervous system state? And managing our signal, managing our nervous system is actually a lot simple when you put it into a framework than we can sometimes think. A lot of us think, I don't have time to meditate or yoga every day. I don't have time to add more to my busy list. Okay, it's not about doing that. It's the simple tools you can do before you ride. Just 30 seconds, either in the saddle or even better, before you even reach your horse. This is what I mean by signal. So when we put all of these together, right? When we put together the fuel, when you put together the structure, the signal, this is what I teach you in the Female Rider Code. This is what my book is about, going into a lot of detail. This is how we start to look at our bodies as structures, as systems, but more importantly, how you will get long-lasting results, longevity in the sport, more fulfillment, more progress with your horse. And it comes down to very simple frameworks. So that is, I think we're just in time under the hour. I know I've said a lot today, but if you have any questions on this, complete the questionnaire in the email link sent. Email me directly. As I offered to you last week, I am offering um, workshops, so whether it's virtual or in person, where we're going to give you a personalized approach, whether it is to your system, to your horse's system, and how we can put this together. If you're interested in that, it's limited spots. Just complete the questionnaire again that is sent to your email. And as always, thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next week where we'll be working on looking at understanding discipline demands specific. Game changer when you start putting horse rider and understanding the demands of the discipline together. You're not going to have any more issues of why is this happening? Why am I feeling this way? Thank you so much.